One day, Desmond Doss, an American, decides to go fight in battle to defend his country during the Second World Battle, but under the condition of not having to use any kind of weapons. Since his main purpose is to go into combat as a doctor to save lives, and he does not agree to have to use any lethal instrument to defend himself.
God says not to kill.
When his father finds out about Desmond's decision, he is upset with him because he knows how hard it is to be there, and that they may not get out alive, since he will have nothing to defend themselves.
But you figure this war is just going to fit in with you?
Desmond did not want to know anything related to weapons because when he was little he was mistreated by his father, an alcoholic ex-battle fighter, who one day occurred to him to try to hit Desmond's mother. Whereupon, Desmond took a gun and pointed it at him, but then he reacted and swore to God never to touch a gun again. That is why Desmond grew up with the conviction of saving lives instead of destroying them. Days later, his girlfriend Dorothy, a nurse he met at the hospital when he saved the life of a man who was hit by a car, finds out about his decision to go into battle, but although she doesn't see it as a good idea, accept his decision. At last the day comes to leave for the Second World Battle in Okinawa, and Desmond promises Dorothy to return soon to get married. She in turn gives him a Bible with a photo of Dorothy with a dedication wishing him to return soon for her. Desmond arrives at Fort Jackson, proud to do something for his country. There he is received very well by the members of the battalion, although some call him a weakling while others make fun of him for having a Bible. From the first day a strong training begins where despite the fact that the sergeant is very strict, Desmond proves to be in very good shape and overcomes all the challenges of the tests, until the one to protect himself with rifles arrives. Desmond does not participate in that test, which annoys the sergeant a lot, since a similar case has never been presented, so he says some very harsh words to Desmond.
I can't touch a gun.
Then he is brought before his superior, who apologizes, since in his story he appears as a conscientious collaborator, and he can be in the battalion, only he cannot have a weapon, nor kill anyone.
If you can't do it here, I can't trust you to do it in battle.
The sergeant laughs at him, since when he comes to war it is to fight. For all the reasons raised, his superior decides to send Desmond to another battalion and tells him that he should be seen by the psychologist. Upon reaching the other group, he is ironically presented as a conscientious objector, ridiculing him for not practicing violence or taking up arms for combat. And the reception by his comrades is not the same as the one he received in the 1st Battalion. This time he is mistreated and embarrassed by many of them, but he remained unwavering and did not respond with more violence. Later the psychologist consults him, and after a deep analysis comes to the conclusion that he should be allowed to work as a combat medic, just like Desmond's dream.
God says not to kill.
But yes, for that he must fully comply with all other areas of training.
He must be allowed to work as a combat medic, provided he qualifies.
From then on, he receives mistreatment from his colleagues who beat him severely. Seeing such behavior, the sergeant forces him to resign, but Desmond resists, since he set a goal for himself and nothing will make him give up. That's why he denies what really happened. The day arrives when Desmond and his girlfriend had chosen to get married, but he cannot attend, since when asking for permission, the sergeant conditions him to take the rifle and use it, because otherwise permission will be denied. Even so, Desmond refuses despite knowing that Dorothy will be left jilted at the altar.
I'm not asking you, Private!
For this reason, Desmond was not only denied permission, but also locked in a solitary room in which Desmond explodes with anger. Days later Dorothy finds out what happened and visits him. She does not understand her position of not wanting to touch a weapon, but since she loves him too much she supports him in her decision. Then she returns and talks to Desmond's father to resolve the situation with her son. The days for Desmond are endless. At night he does not stop having nightmares related to his father in the battle, until one day he is put on trial for disobeying direct orders from his superior. There Desmond defends himself by claiming that he only wants to help by serving as a doctor.
Let him go.
At that moment he is surprised by his father, who enters the trial with a letter mentioning that the defendant's rights as a conscientious objector are protected as an act of Congress, and he cannot be forced to take up arms. The judge, upon finishing reading it, immediately drops the charges. At last Desmond can now calmly participate as a doctor in the battle. So Dorothy and he celebrate the triumph. Days later, the time comes to replace the fallen that they bring in trucks, so the survivors inform them how they perform in the attacks to face the Japanese. The first thing they advise him is that Desmond remove the Red Cross badge from his arm to go unnoticed, since one of the Japanese strategies is to annihilate all medical personnel and the wounded. The battalion begins to climb the enormous slope and they are met with the horrible panorama of lifeless men thrown to pieces on all sides. In some only their heads remain, others eaten by rats and others dying. Suddenly, in the middle of the silence, a wounded man stands up screaming and an attack by the Japanese is triggered, creating a confrontation between them where many American soldiers begin to fall. Desmond is surprised by a Japanese, but about to lose his life. One of the soldiers defends him. Then he begins to pick up the injured, taking them to safe places. Among them he helps one who lost both legs, who has no chance of surviving, but helps him by giving him the opportunity to get out alive.
I'm gonna get you home!
The Japanese are very skilled and come out of nowhere attacking. They also have advantages of being protected inside some bunkers. The confrontation becomes more and more intense. The flamethrower had to be used to get rid of a group of Japanese. The fight continues and becomes more and more intense. The soldiers get closer and closer until they fight hand to hand. Each time they take more ground, and after they manage to destroy the bunkers where the Japanese are, everything remains silent. Apparently the attack is over for that night, but Desmond is very worried about the wounded that are scattered and goes out with Jack to look for them in the dark. Then they rest in one of the holes they made to protect themselves from the attack. Everyone is very moved by all the events that have occurred, and full of panic they decide to rest but without ceasing to be alert, while Desmond does not stop looking at Dorothy's photo. That night Desmond had a nightmare, but that's normal in a battle. Desmond tells Jack the real reason he doesn't want to touch a gun and the vow he made to God never to touch one again. At dawn thousands of Japanese go out to attack again, for which the battalion has to retreat and they call for heavy artillery. Those are moments of terror that the soldiers go through that day, but in the meantime Desmond is dedicated to rescuing the wounded. When the artillery arrives, the attacks calm down a bit and thus the troops can withdraw more calmly. Meanwhile, Desmond, powerless before one of the wounded he couldn't save, asks God with all his faith to help him understand why he's there, when suddenly a voice is heard from among the fallen asking aid. It is there that Desmond understood everything desperate between the smoke and the fire. He drew strength from where he did not have and began to go in search of other wounded, in order to take them to the camp. That is why he came up with the idea of tying them with a rope to lower them one by one without measuring the risk, since the camp is under a hill more than 20 meters high. But Desmond's work becomes complicated, since the Japanese want to finish annihilating the wounded, so it's up to him to protect them with his life, as in one of the cases when he had to cover one with earth and put on top to a lifeless man so that they could not be annihilated. Everything is going very well in the rescue, until the Japanese become aware of Desmond's presence and begin a chase, in which Desmond manages to persuade them. At that moment, he bumps into a wounded Japanese man who unhesitatingly offers him help. As Desmond lowers the wounded, he prays to God to allow him to find and save more soldiers. While at the camp hospital, they are shocked to see so many soldiers rescued by one brave man. The next day, the captain finds out that Desmond is the soldier who was up all night rescuing wounded soldiers. Meanwhile, Desmond once again risks his life to save Sergeant Jack and another wounded man. With imminent danger, he manages to lower them, but Desmond is injured and is lowered on a stretcher. All the soldiers who are there look at the hero in disbelief, since they find it hard to believe that a single man could have saved so many people. Desmond is immediately treated and the colonel apologizes for having made a mistake with him, admitting that what happened up there is a true miracle. It is time to go out to meet. With great faith Desmond and the soldiers face another brutal battle, but this time with more force, until the Japanese surrender. But it is not like that. The Japanese have set a trap for him and suddenly they launch an annihilating object, where Desmond bravely goes to meet him and deflects it, saving the battalion, getting wounded. Then, as the Japanese are defeated, Desmond is carried on a stretcher asking them to find the Bible he left where he was injured. Desmond will forever go down in history for having saved 75 people, and for being the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor for his bravery in combat, which is the highest recognition in America. Desmond and Dorothy were married until she died in 1991. After his heroism highlights his characteristic modesty by giving credit to God, he simply said that the real heroes are buried there in the cemetery. Captain Jack once again regrets what he said to Desmond when he arrived in the army, acknowledging that he is a very brave man and that through the ironies of life, he saved his life. Desmond passed away at the age of 87 in March 2006. This is the summary of a Christian film based on true events called Hacksaw Ridge. Click here and do not miss the next story.